Thanks for joining me for the Pray for Micah podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review, and check out my YouTube channel and follow me on social media. Pray for Micah Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And now, on with the show.
Welcome to the Pray for Micah podcast. And now your host, Micah Chrisman.
Welcome to the Pray for Micah podcast, where we explore art, activism, spirituality, and our cosmic insignificance/significance. I'm here with Laela Zaidi, dear friend Laela. And she is a Pakistani-American Master of Social Work student and climate justice organizer. She loves traveling, eating good food, playing tennis, and roller skating. She was raised in Joplin, Missouri, and now lives around the corner from me here in the Northeast. And we met each other through working at Alive and Well Communities. You were a AmeriCorps Vista.
Ooh, you remembered.
I was like, what is it again?
I did a lot of things there, so it's okay.
You were just the Swiss Army woman of all the things we did in Kansas City.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was fun working with you. If anyone wants to check out, we partnered with folks and we did a campaign called Live KC.
Yeah, that was fun.
You
Yeah.
can go to livekc.org where we recorded a bunch of stories.
Yeah.
Local activists and stuff. So, Laela, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I feel so special that you invited me to your awesome podcast. So,
Yes.
yeah, I'm getting the celebrity treatment over here. You know, all this makes me feel like very important. So I appreciate it. And it's fun.
Oh, yeah. Next time I'll have the makeup artists. And
I am a little disappointed. I was expecting full hair, makeup, and an outfit picked out.
Oh, yeah. I thought about it. I was like, you were like texting me. You're like, don't take too many pictures. I'm like, oh, we're video recording this. And I was like, I have no clothes I could offer her if she wanted.
Yeah.
It's like, you want a baggy shirt to wear?
Yeah, that's the look now. So honestly, yeah, Micah, I like your shirt actually.
Thank you. This is summer shirt, Micah. I was like, I need a couple new shirts for the summer.
That's awesome. I'm still wearing all black, so I've not adapted.
Hey, it's the sign of the times, right? You know, just let me wear black. Let me just black out my Facebook cover. Just let everyone know that everything's just
not good. The vibes are bad.
That's why I have to be like, let me wear some paisley to make myself feel better, you know.
I think it works though, you know, like when we honor our appearance, like that sometimes seems shallow, but like it works.
Yeah. I don't, you've experienced it. I like working from home, but sometimes, it can feel very low energy going to work.
Exactly.
Just going to my desk, wearing my gym shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah, I still got that eye crust in my eye from sleeping, and I'm like, oh man, I'm like not in any headspace to work right now.
Right.
But I slept that extra 20 minutes instead of getting ready because I work from home. Yeah.
Oh, I feel that 100%. Yep.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'm like, to feel better. Yeah. Like when I have a good morning, I'll like actually shower, get ready for work, air quotes.
Yeah. No, but that's good.
Office.
Yeah. I know that like I'm more productive when I do things like that. And yet.
The mornings where I'm just pouring the coffee in and logging on as quick as I can because I have a meeting in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I feel that. I live that life.
So what's been new? How's your summer treating you?
My summer is treating me well. I am taking summer classes at UMKC. I am a social work student, graduate student, as you mentioned in that lovely bio that I wrote.
It was a great bio, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely... I deserve an award. Pulitzer's coming my way.
Yeah. Roller skating. I mean,
yeah, I got it all. I got the serious stuff. I got the, like, my hobbies.
Little quirks.
And my connection to you. So I really tied it all together. But yeah, I've been taking summer classes and just trying to spend more time, like, in taking care of myself. I did quit my job and I it's hard to work and be a student. And so I'm just,
Sure.
focusing on school, but also been doing organizing work. I'm a organizer with Sunrise Movement, Kansas City. And
Shout out to Sunrise.
yeah, it's always a sunrise. So yeah, I've been doing that and I've been feeling pretty good about my time. And yeah, I mean, it's really hot though.
Yeah.
And I know it's one of those things where I know it's always been hot, but it just feels hotter and hotter all the time. But maybe I'm just like thinking about the climate crisis all the time.
Right.
So I'm like, is it really hotter than it normally is? Or, it's hard to say. Or am I just noticing it more? So there's that. How's your summer been?
Good. Also hot. If people probably can't, they might hear the little whirring in the background. I decided to put a fan in the, the recording room because I was like, half the time when I record these podcasts, by the time I set up all the lights and do everything, I'm like sweating. I told Laela, I was like, I have to basically wear a different outfit for when I sit up and then change, because otherwise I've just sat down and just look like a
well, I feel that. I feel like
mess.
I can't move that much in my house either. Like, at least like from 1 to 6 p.m. It's just too hot to be moving around too much.
Right. Yeah. I have blackout curtains. I'm just like, I feel like it looks like a depressed drug den sometimes in my house.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is really the efficient way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
No, for
trapping.
sure. For sure.
But going back to the whole, do we notice climate change? In my 33 years of existence on this planet, I'm an old, wise person now. I do feel like I notice, like, at least for sure, like the snow levels. Like, I don't, like, summer's just always hot for me. I'm just like, I tell people, like, basically from like end of May till mid-October, I'm just sweating.
You have sweaty Micah and not sweaty Micah.
Exactly. And then I like fully hit my stride when it's like brisk and chilly outside and everyone's like, it's so cold, I can't move. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is like flannel weather, happy Micah time. But I remember, like, as a kid, like, grow up on the farm, there'd be snow drifts 6 feet, like, on our driveway. Like, if we were planning for a snowstorm, it was like we were not going to get out of our, like, driveway, out of our house, or our outer road. And we still get snow, obviously, but I never see that amount of snow. Like, like, it might be, like, a foot max, And so it's weird because they're saying that there are farmers who've been farming for 30, 40 years here in like the States and like Kansas and stuff, who are starting to notice also like these changes in weather patterns.
The effects are here. I think up in an air conditioned home for a lot of my life, a aired and heated home. I mean, in the sense that like, I'm not sure. And coming up to Kansas City, there's way more snow up here in the winter than southern Missouri, I feel.
Yeah.
Though we did get pretty nasty snow and ice storms, and so maybe it's not as intense now. So it's hard to say, though. I obviously know that like it's definitely getting hotter.
Yeah.
It gets hotter earlier. I mean, like the weather fluctuations in winter are scary. We had a tornado in December. I mean, not here, but in Illinois and eastern Missouri, like in December. I mean, yeah, things are changing. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, maybe there's a future where kids don't see snow as often, and that's pretty bizarre to think,
Yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm just making this up, but someone was saying basically at some point, like the Southwest will just keep creeping up, like the state, like
Whoa.
basically like Oklahoma and like most of Kansas, like Kansas will start looking like parts of the Southwest after like 80 years, 100 years from now, like maybe sooner, I don't know, but like, yeah, basically if you already live in Arizona, you're just going to be roasting to death.
Oh my gosh, you are literally a boiled egg. That's so scary. Yeah, and like, I've been talking to my friends. We've all noticed this like windshield phenomenon. Have you heard about this? So growing up, did you ever notice that like you go on a road trip, it doesn't even have to be very far, like, driving an hour or two, and there'd be bugs all over your windshield.
Yes.
And I have not experienced that.
Really?
Recently, have you? When you think about it, have you had
guess-
to go do the squeegee at the gas station?
Yes. So many bugs.
Have you had to do that recently, though?
No, I haven't. Oh my gosh.
Actually, if you Google this, I saw a Wikipedia page like windshield phenomenon. Like there's less insects out
Wow.
when you drive.
This is
I need
weird.
to fact check that, but like, yeah, because someone said, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I recently went, like, I drive to Joplin to see my family pretty often. I have never had to squeegee the windshield.
Yeah, oh gosh. Yeah, I was gonna say I can't think of I went on a fishing trip with my dad and my brother a few weeks ago. It wasn't that bad though. Yeah, I remember what you're talking about though. It's just like your whole
infested.
windshield. Like you can push the button as much as you want and it just smears the bug guts like just up and down the window, and it's like, this sounds like something like a weird, crack in the simulation kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like this sounds like, I don't know if you've been seeing that lately, but I guess CERN, CERN, the whole Hadron Collider over.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, there's all these conspiracies
the one that found
about.
Okay. Is it the one that found the Higgs boson?
Yeah, I think so.
Or did they find the gravitational waves? Whatever. Something.
They're smashing particles and doing crazy things, and there's all these conspiracies that every time they fire it up, basically, for lack of terms, I don't understand what they're doing. That it basically creates new Mandela effects or glitches in the world. Like
that literally could be the windshield phenomenon.
Yeah, that's what I'm picturing. I'm just when you said that, I'm just like, oh, okay, so there's no bugs anymore. Oh, CERN.
Yeah.
CERN. Like all over.
No, but it's like bizarre, right? I mean, it is bizarre. Like, I would think, I don't know.
Or it's just global warming. Right. Yeah, or just weird effects happening.
I recently watched that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh my gosh. Hand clap for that movie.
Yeah, seriously, like one of the best movies I've ever seen.
Yes.
And I'm like, there's that part where they're talking about like, don't you sense something's off? Like something's off in the multiverse. And your coffee doesn't taste right, or like everything's just off. And I'm like, there's no more bugs on the windshield. Like maybe maybe it is a crack in the simulation. I think you convinced me.
But you're right. That's like definitely become like one of my top 10 movies of all.
Yeah.
Like I've watched it twice and I'm just like, you just see new things in it.
Yeah, same. I'm like, I want to watch it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though I've seen it twice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good. I mean, I don't know. I guess we shouldn't do spoilers, but like it was really good. And I just appreciated so much of it. I'm the child of immigrants, and it was, just like imagining new lives. Like what would all of our lives look like had certain decisions been different, and yet it was also so universal, right? Like I love that it wasn't just about their culture, identity, being a Chinese family. Like it was, you know what I mean? Like it was just felt very universal, and I love that. And I just also love that like they experience the microaggressions, but it's not like they have to like the center of the movie where they like experienced a hate crime or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it just really felt like a genuine family drama, like you're really looking at this family's like life, and I just love that. So
would recommend. Go check out Everything Everywhere All at Once. And again, will not put out spoilers, but it just as a fact of like these moments of like, what is my significance? It ties very well into my theme for this podcast.
Yeah, it does.
And like, there's like one of my favorite scenes is like when they're both like switched to a universe where they're both rocks.
Oh yeah.
And they're just like sitting next to each other like, oh, well, it looks like we ended up in a world where we're both rocks. And they're just like, what is happening? Like, it's okay. Don't be overwhelmed. Just be a rock. And I don't know. That just spoke to me at a very visceral level, because it's like, we're all looking for that purpose and significance of why we're here. And how would you do that if you ended up in a universe where you're a rock? You would just be a rock. And so what does that mean? I don't know. In my mind, what does that mean
adapting
to be human?
to your circumstances, like, and finding meaning in your circumstances. I mean, the message of the movie was pretty simple in that way.
Sure.
Like, and yet it just delivered it in such a powerful way, and like just so human. And I think I know another like thing I gathered from the movie was like, hope and optimism are like it's like Mariam Makaba says, like it's a discipline. It's something that it's a strength, but it's not just something something you have to practice. And in every situation, every universe, like they kind of have to find that. And like they're still sitting there. They could sit there and wonder, like, would my life have been better in some other circumstance, or they could just accept the circumstances they've been given. was very existential. I mean, but very powerful. And yeah, I don't know, just really resonated with me, especially like given all that's going on. Like, I don't know. And I love like something the dad in the movie says, like, you think my naivety is a weakness, but it's actually a strength. Basically, you're like, it's how I fight. It's how I fight what I've been given, basically, you know.
Right.
I just thought that was very powerful. But yeah, but even if you're a rock, like maybe there's some
there could be a piece in like being, I don't know, again, just the metaphor of just what does it mean to be human? Like, we can't accept sometimes like it's okay to just be this organic matter, and that it is sacred in itself. And you know, if we were a rock, we would just be like, man, that feels even more mundane or even more pointless, because I'm just, you know, element, you know, earth, rare earth elements, whatever, rocks and dirt and dust, and yet our bodies are made of that stuff. Stardust, you know.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah, and they were talking about like, really, the universe has spent way more time without humans, really. And it's, you know, or they're like, most of the multiverses actually are like this, where everyone's just a rock.
Right.
And like,
what a fortunate world we live in that we get to exist at this moment.
Yeah, exactly. That was, no, but like, actually what you just said was like, I mean, I guess this is a spoiler, but a spoiler alert, they all find meaning in their existence. And one of the pieces was the fact that you're just here at this moment is like a gift.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me of like, I mean, the movie is just in general very trippy, and it's got everything: action, love, humor, all that stuff. But it feels kind of like you're on a psychedelic trip, you know?
I know, yeah. Like the first time I watched it, the first 20 minutes, I was just like, oh my god,
it's a lot. Like I've watched it with somebody that we only watched like half of it. We're like, it's just so dense. We had to just like pause, but. It is just kind of funny, like if you have those kind of experiences, psychedelic experience, it's like it all comes down to, you know, all these revelations people have. They're like, I am one with the universe. Everything is about acceptance and love and it seems so profound, and it's like, it's so simple.
Yeah.
It's like,
you really needed psychedelics to figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Did you really? No, probably not. But you know,
hilarious. Yeah, and I think like actually watching it the second time, I was like, there's so much going on in the movie, but it is like pretty simple, and that was like comfort. That's why I really do recommend people watch it again, because it was much more like wholesome and comforting the second time, because I was like, okay, I get it. And actually it's like slightly predictable. I mean, I had seen it before, but like, so I guess of course it's predictable, but it's just like, oh yeah, I mean, the point is just what we're saying, like, I liked
one of the lines he said where the dad, he's like, you know, I know you talk down about a world where we just did taxes and laundry together, and he's like, but just know, like, I would have loved being in that world with you.
Tears.
And like, I know, because like you're watching, it's like, oh yeah, like if I could live in a world where I'm a famous person or I'm doing this and that, and we just, you know, hey, there's a beauty in just even the mundane of like finding a partner, somebody just like, hey, we can just do taxes and laundry together, you know.
I know, that was very resonating, because I feel like I used to have this image of my life in which I was super successful. I mean, I was very attached to that, you know, like being really successful, and I'm not saying I've shed that entirely, but just like, I don't know, just really, it was very, it resonated with me, because I'm trying to take steps to not be so like obsessed with that. I don't know if obsessed is the right word, but just like so attached to that. And I think that really hit home. And again, like I think an immigrant story is such a good one to use to convey that message. Again, it's a universal message, but like just thinking about my parents too, like just thinking about like that is a pressure they have, and it could have gone a different way, you know. And so I don't know, I really want my parents to see. I've been telling them, but they're just like, what it's like action, it's multiverse, like what. My mom's like, no violence, I don't really like violence. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just like watch the movie. You know.
Yeah, my brother sat my parents out apparently tried to watch it with them, and they had no interest in the movie. They're just like,
Yeah.
especially some of the weird fight scenes that involve butt plugs and some weird stuff. They're
Oh
just
my
like,
gosh.
what the hell are you making me watch? Again, sorry for the spoilers. Just go watch the movie. It's been out for a minute. So
Yeah, I don't
deal
feel
with
that
it.
bad. Yeah, deal with it.
Yeah, deal with it. Yeah, don't listen. You could have skip forward if you
Yeah,
don't
you
wanna.
can skip this episode of Micah's podcast if you don't want to hear it.
Well, can we talk more about your family?
Yeah.
Just your journey, because you said you grew up in Joplin. So
Yeah, so, I was born in New Jersey. My parents immigrated there from Pakistan before I was born. I should really know the year, and I don't. I think it was just before I was born. I don't really remember. This is pretty bad. But a lot of my parents met in med school in Lahore, Pakistan, and then they moved to New Jersey through basically like my dad got a green card because when his dad got a green card and he applied before he was 21, and it was kind of lucky in the sense like he skipped a couple grades in school somehow. I don't know. The school
Really?
system there is just, I think, a little more lenient about stuff like that, and went to med school at like 18 or 19. And so it was
Wow.
like done with med school.
Holy cow.
Which I think is a British system of education. So like that is more common there. Like you kind of do med school as like an undergrad kind of situation. Maybe usually it's a little longer, at least in the UK, I think. But regardless of that, that's so hard to tell the story. 'Cause like you
Sure.
just go down like this rabbit hole.
No,
Again,
yeah.
why that movie's so resonant. 'Cause I'm like, wow, all these little things that just happened to line up that my parents were able to move here. And then actually my dad did his residency on the East Coast. And from what I hear, and it's interesting, he won't always super talk openly about it. He's just like, well, it's really hard to find a job. And more recently, he's gotten close to at least admitting that like it's discrimination, because at that time, a lot of like foreign educated doctors were moving to the U.S. I mean, they still do, but he just couldn't really find a job easily. Not to say it was super hard. He basically, I think, panicked and got a job offer in like Joplin, Missouri, a rural town, and just accepted it and began practicing medicine there. And he's like a family doctor, but is specialized in pulmonology and ICU, critical care. So it's a very high need. He's one of the two first, like, or at least the second, I believe, like lung specialist in that area.
Really?
In Joplin, which Joplin is like a town of 50,000 people in Southwest Missouri. So yeah, I mean, it's not quite a suburb. It's actually like the hub of like all these rural communities around it. So
Right.
even
Kind of like
though
Springfield, or like
yeah,
it's like a major area where people can get access to healthcare
right,
and
exactly, because there's 2 hospitals actually in Joplin, which for not a big town. So anyway, then my mom did her residency in psychiatry in St. Louis. And yeah, another thing, I'm always like, why didn't we live in St. Louis? And then but then she came back to Joplin and they've lived there since then. So I grew up there and then went to college in Arkansas, in Conway, Arkansas at Hendrix College. And then
What was that like?
yeah, so, I majored in religious studies, which I never thought I would major in. I thought I was going to do, political science. I was very, like, politically involved as a teenager in Joplin, even though it was really conservative, I remember being, like, one of few Democrats. I mean, at that time, I worked a lot for Democrats, and just being, I don't know, just that was the thing. But then I got to Conway, and I was, like, going to a liberal arts school, got to take classes in all sorts of things, which is what I wanted, and kind of discovered like I actually was interested in learning more about religion and the connection between religion and politics and society, and that was really cool. And I really liked Arkansas because it's so beautiful.
Oh, it's so nice.
Gorgeous. And I knew I wanted to go to like a small, like, tight-knit liberal arts school, but I think I had romanticized it because I thought it would be this like progressive oasis that Joplin wasn't. And obviously quickly learned, like, going to a school with 85% white people who are from the South, like, I mean, it could be challenging at times, like,
Sure.
but then I'm still really grateful for that experience because, I got to explore outside. I got to go camping and, canoeing. And, like, actually Arkansas, when I think about it, growing up in Joplin was, like, my parents weren't really outdoorsy, but I got to hear, like, all my friends would go there for, like, to do outdoorsy stuff. And I remember really wanting to do that. So it was cool. And then I think it really set me up after that because I went to live in Japan for 2 years and taught English on the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. And that was really cool. And so I think it kind of like weirdly prepared me for that.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't that far from home, but yeah.
Japan's as far away from home as you could get.
Yeah, it is.
From going from Arkansas all the way there.
Yeah, it really was. And then I came back it was in the middle of the pandemic, and my sister had been living in New York for 8 years, and she moved to Joplin with her husband as well. And we all just kind of like reconvened, like set up base camp there. And I kind of struggled, I think one thing about I'd originally was looking so forward to going home and like being in my early 20s back in America, obviously. And then it kind of, that dream went to the trash can with the pandemic, and I was in Joplin, and it was really frightening because no one there was really taking it seriously. And I just want to be close to my family. So I actually just moved to Kansas City as like it was convenient. It's 2.5 hours north, but still a city.
Right.
And
not as far as St. Louis.
Yeah, not as far as St. Louis, even though like I kind of prefer St. Louis.
Oh, don't say that on my podcast. No.
Yeah. I mean,
St. Louis is cool. I've had a change of heart towards it over having a job, that's based there for a little bit, and
there's just more to do as a tourist, I think. I don't know what that means in terms of living there, obviously, but it is far. So, far from Joplin.
Fun fact. Did you know that Kansas City was originally the spot they were going to put the arch?
Really?
Yeah, it was supposed to be the gateway to the west because it was the furthest west, more developed city than St. Louis. And they literally just chose St. Louis because whoever they were buying the property from or whatever to do it, it was cheaper. And so they just...
I mean, but it's right on the river. Like, it kind of
No,
makes
it's beautiful there. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
going back to the multiverse thing, in another universe, Kansas City got the arch over by our side of the Missouri River.
Right. Yeah, that's so
No.
funny.
Yeah, I don't know.
No,
Yeah, they both have
as a kid, like, we would go to St. Louis a lot because my mom, like, was doing her residency when I was in elementary school, or, like, I don't know, a little bit before then. And I just loved going to the arch. Like, I would just cry and make my parents, like, at least drive me past it or go sit on the lawn. And, like, my older sister, who's 6 years older than me, was just like, oh, my gosh, why are we going again? And I'd just be like, yay. So I think maybe I have fond memories. That's why.
Did you actually ever go up in the arch, like in the elevator?
Yeah, like back when you could do that. Yeah, like all the time.
They don't do it anymore?
I don't, maybe.
They theoretically do it still, but every time I've gone, it's either under construction, maintenance, and I'm just like, well, I guess I'll never go up in the little elevator thing that goes to the top.
Yeah, and it's crammed, so maybe it's a safety concern. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure with the pandemic and stuff. Where I really want to go is check out City Museum or whatever.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
supposed to be a big
I haven't been there.
playground.
Yeah.
Thing.
All right, Micah, when we go to St. Louis.
All right, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go get the City Museum to climb on adult jungle gym. It's like a whole, multi-complex, like,
right.
they've got like all this stuff.
Yeah. It's like a playground for adults.
Mm-hmm. I guess
awesome.
kids are there too, but things I've seen, a lot of adults are like climbing these structures, and there's tunnels and secret corridors, and
that sounds fun. Yeah, see, like, I just think St. Louis, like, it's got stuff to do.
It's okay. It's all right. I don't hate you
anyone.
for saying it. I don't hate you. I just don't totally agree with you.
Right.
So.
You grew up in Kansas City, right?
Yeah. Well,
Grain Valley.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm about 30 minutes outside the city, and so, but yeah, I went after school, and I moved to the city. It was like kind of re-engaging the city I've always lived around, but never really like lived in, and so it felt like learning a new city.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, my family would go to the plaza and go whatever, Westport or different places sometimes, but yeah.
Did you ever have like a vision that you'd live somewhere further away, or did you all always kind of think you'd live here?
Well, kind of during my ministry days where I was like looking at basically maybe being pastor or missionary. Yeah, I had like ideas or thoughts of like either working for a church outside of the state or moving to a different country altogether for like a year or two. Haven't done either of those.
Yeah.
Mainly just because I went through whole faith deconstruction in college and
that's
realize
good.
how much. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm sure. I don't know. I want to go back to your religious studies.
Yeah.
You
For
did.
sure.
Because I'm sure once you kind of are in that world and you have the veil kind of lifted and you realize. Like, I remember one of the key moments that was like one of the sparks of like challenging my systems of belief that I just kind of been raised in or, was kind of on a trajectory to be a part of, was writing a research paper in grad school. It was one of my classes. And originally I was thinking about doing it as a thesis topic. It was something I was originally exploring. I ended up doing some of those writing about because Ferguson was happening. So I decided to focus on the communication and social movement rhetoric of Ferguson after Mike Brown was killed. But for one of my classes, I wrote this big, long, like 40-page paper about the intertwining connections between the church, like Christian church, specifically in capitalism. And literally there was like these research articles and things I was reading like that, like they did hard research on, and people basically have these categories of what they think makes a successful church or what they perceive as a successful church.
Yeah.
And one of the things, legitimately, one of the categories was having big screen TVs.
Oh my gosh. But who was surveyed? Do you remember?
It's been so long.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and read it.
That's so fast. I see. Those are the kinds of things always interested me about, studying religion, was like that stuff, like the anthropology of it. I mean,
exactly.
like, or just generally like, why do people gravitate? What is their like idea of, like the faith, like in that way, physically in physical space? Because it tells you a lot about the values, or like actually that tells you more about sometimes like where their faith actually is.
Oh, for sure. And I came from like youth group and church experience where like the bigger the stage, the more lights, the more smoke machines.
I mean, it's like
all
Jesus
that stuff.
camp, I guess.
It's just basically a big show.
Right.
And
that was always fascinating to me, like being a Muslim, because I am Muslim, and I grew up in a Muslim home. I have a very different practice and vision of that, so it's kind of I think it's be a good conversation from two different faith perspectives on what that means. But like, one of the things that I just was always surprised about was it just really felt like when you're Muslim, you just like pray privately, like everyone shows up, but they're really praying privately. Yeah. In a way, they're praying all in a group, and certainly someone is praying, like leading the prayer. But at least in my masjid, like my mosque growing up, there wasn't really like even a strong sermon culture. Like, and actually we didn't have like like a or like an imam, like, like the leader of we didn't hire someone to do that. It was just like a rotating role in the community. And I was just very fascinated by like my peers who would talk about going to church, or they'd invite me and they'd make it sound so exciting. And I'm like, that just sounds like a totally different universe,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because I remember, it's very different. Center stage. And actually our mosque growing up was in my parents helped start a mosque in Joplin, like along with, other Muslims. And it was originally housed in a former church, what used to be a church. And it's funny because, there's this huge stage and altar, but we would just have to like turn away from it because like you have to face like Mecca when you pray. So we just completely ignored its presence, even though it was there. I don't know. It's just like that's totally different orientation in that space. So like, that's very interesting what you're talking about. Like, screens. And one time I visited a church in Arkansas. It's actually one of the first assignments I had to do for like the intro to world religions course. It was like going to a place of worship that you were unfamiliar with and like just writing about your experience.
Uh-huh.
And I went to this like Pentecostal church.
Oh, right. That's my people.
Yeah. Oh my.
Well, we weren't Pentecostal, but
Yeah.
in that same vein. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember there's like a credit card machine in the back to make your donation.
Okay.
And I would just
Wow.
and there were big screen TVs actually. And I remember the pastor was like talking about a giveaway. If you donate today, like you'll be put into a raffle for like all these awesome things. Like go to the machine in the back. And I just was very surprised, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. I remember going on a mission trip to Moldova back in college. And while we were there, we visited an Orthodox Christian church, like cathedral, really.
Mm-hmm.
And the pastor person we were meeting with there was Baptist. So he was not about anything we were experiencing, but it's a sight. So that's why he took us. Like, it's a beautiful kind of experience. And as we're walking through, he's explaining, like, there's these murals on the floor where there's like almost like a pathway in a circle that goes around the room. And as you look around, there's like basically the story of Christ from like birth to death to resurrection, and was explaining how these old, basically, huge, churches, the worship experience was the building. Like, it wasn't a stage and people. It was like basically these artifacts, that basically you would do these prayer walks through the room. And like as the priest is like, swinging the smoke altar thing, but it was just like this really beautiful thing to like see, like, yeah, because I grew up basically in these churches that were warehouses. They just like, let's find a big box and put a stage and smoke machine and we're all directing towards the worship leader or the pastor, like you're saying, a leader or people who are gonna. And again, there's similarities in all of it, but I just thought it was beautiful that like the actual message and like everything was symbolized in the space. It was symbolic. And like you were saying, I guess the parallel with that, with Muslims, like, you change directions and you pray, and you're
I mean, I think it's
that.
like having a ritual that is not like it just kind of stands the test of time or something. I don't know what's so powerful about that. I mean, I like that. I like that you don't have to. I always also thought it was interesting, like, evangelical Christians around me growing up were very much about like having this super personal relationship with God. Like you have to talk directly and God says something back to you. And I remember it really made me like insecure about my faith because I was just like, I don't have that relationship. Like I just do. It's
more communal. It's more like a shared experience with people.
Yeah. Or like, and even if I'm praying alone with my parents or something, like, I mean, I just know what to do. Like, I don't know. Like I think I just rest on like, oh, I'm at peace. Yeah. Or I'm at like, I am with my family or I'm just relaxed. I don't know. Maybe it's like meditating for me. And now I'm feeling like, oh shoot, I don't like actually have a conversation with God all the time. But, and so it just made me, I don't mean to like downplay. Well, it just was very different, I'll say.
Very different. Yeah. And that, again, my whole stance is if whatever faith, belief, or construct helps you to see outside yourself, to love other people. And if that means having a personal relationship with God, if that means having a box and a stage, and it sounds like it's not for me, but if that helps you take care of other people and the environment, then cool. But if you're, I'm going to worship God on Sunday in this thing and also fuck the environment and fuck other people, like get away, immigrants.
Like, let's be honest, like, there is a mission, like what we're describing is like this business about it, which certainly isn't just limited to Christianity, but in America, it's very much imbued with that, and so it's problematic. Ugh.
So, what was your religious studies like?
Yes.
As far as, did it open up thoughts about being Muslim? Did it make you like connect with other people? Like, I don't know, just like what were some of the big learning points that you felt?
I think it. So one of the problems too is like I was going to school, even though the school wasn't formally aligned with the Methodist Church. I mean, Hendrix did have that history of being like a Methodist school. Not as the religious studies program certainly wasn't a seminary, though some people go on to do that, though not everybody. So I feel like I actually learned a lot about Christianity and also just like the anthropology of religion, and there's always questions in religious studies program, like, why does religious studies exist? It's kind of a weird category because, not in every society is like religion so separate from everything else. That's a very like Western construct to think of religion as like this institutionalized category that you could study that's like kind of like it actually emerges out of this idea of separation of church and state and secularism. And it's like, so it's even in this study, you're like, it actually broke down a lot of, for me, like, actually what does it mean to even have like a category of study like that in and of itself is very academic and problematic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
But I did learn a lot of cool things. I mean, I studied I kind of, it's undergrad, so it's very broad, but like I was much more interested in religion and contemporary culture and literature. I guess like just how do people creatively express their religion, but also like just power, because I thought religion growing up for me, and that's kind of this journey I had, that like I grew up as, a Pakistani, like I grew up as a Pakistani Muslim in a very white Christian American conservative environment. And I thought I used to boil it all down to like political differences, right? Like literally just like those people are Republicans and I'm a family that votes on a Democratic ticket. And then I realized later, like, it's actually not so simple as that. Religion has a huge role in this. Religion is a reason why, like, all these people don't like me, And so, and they see Islam as a threat. So, I mean, it just really began to think about, how does religion actually construct people's values, their morals, in ways that don't just show up when they're at church or when they're, doing their faith, but in their politics and the decisions they make and the community they envision. I mean, one of the most fascinating classes I took was cognitive linguistics and theology, and it was taught by a professor who used a cognitive linguistic approach to like interpret the Bible and just talked about like the construction of metaphors and like what that means, not just for like this idea of like thinking of, for example, God as a father versus God as a God as father versus like God as a judge, or God as like God, I don't
know.
Yeah, like what do these things like actually inform? And he would break it down as to like, basically like I'm not even getting his terminology correct, but like, authoritative versus like, more compassionate or something like that. I don't know. Right. Basically, so I just thought about religion in public life like that. I thought about religion. I don't know. It just was very eye-opening for me. And I remember getting judged a lot because I had a very political mind. I was very I'm very much into community organizing, changing the conditions of the world. And people were like, why don't you do policy? Why don't you do politics? And I'm like, we really need to talk about the faith communities too. And also just what does it mean to really believe in something? People take leaps of faith all the time. Sure. They take a leap of faith. Even when you think about the Constitution, they think of this like aspiration. Yeah, and that can mean two different things. You can use that as a, I don't know, it can mean many things. Or you could be like, actually, we should deconstruct that and tear it down. And like, yeah, so people do that all the time. Even with science, they do that. And so that was another cool thing. Is like just thinking of the way religion intersects with everything. I'm rambling now, landing the plane.
You're rambling in the right space. This is my jams. This is what I love to like probe and delve deep into. Because
you talked about, you've deconstructed your, faith. And the weird thing for me, though, is like I feel like it allowed me a space to explore religion without getting personal. And that's still taking me some time to like break down that wall, because I have a fear of sometimes doing that. So it just kind of gave me this space to explore it without always having to like make it really personal,
Sure.
Because I think that's just hard sometimes. I don't know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. In school, it was very difficult to probe my faith in a non-personal way. But I remember I took like a philosophy of religion class. Very informative class, like Like it's the one of the only, like, it was just like an extracurricular class that I took because I just wasn't going to be a philosophy major or anything, but I was just like, hey, I'm interested in exploring this. And like probably one of the things that like really stuck out to me was just this idea of panentheism, like not pantheism, but P-A-N-E-N theism.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that all is in God.
Mm.
And that just kind of created the right shift in my just like thinking the construct that we have in our heads of what is the divine, what does God look like? Because like you said, it was always very much this personal relationship, a person, Jesus in my head, blue-eyed, white-haired.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus, never lived mind that he was from the Middle East and there are no
You're
white people in
right.
the Bible.
You're right.
But it was just like, yeah, and the way that they talked about it as like a metaphor to explain pantheism, like in the book anyways that we were reading, was they actually use a story about Moses. So I don't know who wrote the book, but I feel like they wrote it to like Christians to try and like, but there's like a story in the Bible where Moses says he like tells God, like, I want to see you. Like, I'd like to. And God basically is like, no human is able to look upon me and like live. Like, my glory is too powerful. It
Right.
kills people. And so God satisfies his request by like putting him in this, like, that says a cleft of a rock. So like put him in this little wedge where the periphery, and then God just passed by so that Moses saw like just the trail, like the backside of God. And basically the metaphor.
I think I heard, I mean, it's so funny. I just like peripheral, like, oh yeah, I know that story because I don't know if it's in the Quran, but like obviously like the Quran and Bible shares so much. And so then my parents were always okay with me watching like Veggie Tales and stuff.
Isn't that
like,
funny?
Oh yeah. Or
like,
there was that movie Moses. Like maybe it was like animated or something, and I saw that.
I feel the same way about Judaism. Like anytime I see them like quote or tell a story in the Old Testament, like, oh, like yeah, I forget we're part of the same religion basically,
Yeah,
or where we're all bifurcations.
Yeah.
Dissect. But anyways, the metaphor is just supposed to be like, what if the whole universe is like God's backside, so to speak.
Yeah.
And maybe when we die, we get to see his, her, their face, you know, to see the essence of it all. And so I have definitely become more of a mystic in that way of just exploring my faith from more of a, rather than directing it towards a thing, you know, it's
exactly just that general mystery of the universe, really. You know, you find that everywhere. I mean, something that's very beautiful about Islam that I think many Muslims forget is this concept of Tawheed, which is this like oneness. I mean, that's like always something that was very hammered into me as a kid. When you're, you know, a Muslim, is like, we believe in one God. There's this one essence, and, you know, it's just like this oneness that usually we just learn. I just interpret it as, okay, so that means like there's no, like, obviously Muslims reject the idea that Jesus is the Son of God. Okay, got it. But actually there's interpretations that are like, well, if God is, this oneness is so profound, like nothing can really be separate from God. Nothing he creates, or nothing, I mean, I use he as just, this is natural. Nothing God creates is separate from God.
Yeah.
And so I find that very compelling, and that's why I'm like, okay, like that makes so much more sense to me.
Yeah.
You know, it's so much more
really
compassionate. It's so much more like, I don't know. It just means that like also nothing can, even in perfection, nothing is like, I don't know, like especially just being a woman or queer or whatever. Like we're often told that like all these things don't satisfy God for whatever reason. But I'm like, well, in some way it's part of God because it is created. If you believe it is created from God, then it is part of God, and you can't really hate it, you know? Right. So I don't know. I think, yeah, that mysticism like you're describing, I think that is very, I don't know. It's just, it's easier because it also holds nuance too. And like just this idea that you don't need to know everything. Whereas like, yeah, another thing we explored, like people who have constructions of religion or God where God is just an accounter. Like God is just accounting all your sins, just a tally your whole life of good or bad. I mean, that's just not, I don't know. It doesn't really tell me any more about like why the world is the way it is, or just make me have any curiosity about people and relationships or like mystery at all, you know?
Yeah, if anything, it just helps us divide each other more into our camps, because it's like, no, we believe in this thing, and our God says you'll die and go to this torture place. You know, it's always like the convenient thing, right? If you have the truth, it's always convenient that everybody else is going to hell, whatever.
Right.
Whether you're Mormon.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why like one of the best classes I ever took was like on the Book of Revelation. It was like obviously all about liberation theology and like various interpretations of this book, and also how it is, you know, the book of the Bible that also some far right Christians use to like justify like really horrible things. And but we talked about like one of the big things the professor was, you know, talking about was just like, yeah, sin is like, there was a time in the time of Christianity when sin was actually like much bigger, like the idea of like sin of the church, or like the sin of like institutions, or the sin of wealth and greed. And like I always think that's also fascinating, like at what point did we think that really sin is just about these super individualized taboos and not like these bigger systemic injustices? And I think Islam, it's like same thing, because like there are people who have weaponized this faith, you know,
oh yeah, all faiths,
you know, yeah, this in the institutionalized version of this faith, like it can be used to demonize people for these like various little transgressions, quote unquote transgressions, instead of like the immorality of like, you know, poverty or like systemic poverty. Like I see that sign on your wall, systemic poverty is immoral. Like, yeah, that's the real sin.
Right. Yes. Snap. Yeah, I think that was the shift for me too. Once I was like writing about Ferguson and realizing just like, man, I lived my whole life in this faith system where the biggest things that we were trying to save people, right? Save them from, it turned into like secular music with cuss words and, you know, pornography and these things that like, yeah, I get it. Like, yeah, those are all whatever. That's what those folks want to, you know, but what's the bigger issue is probably the sex trafficking behind.
Like
maybe that's
well, and that's why it's intentional. It's intentional to distract you from the real issues, and that's where it's like I draw that line of like, no, someone's benefiting from you getting really mad at someone else's choices around, you know, like at least that's what we're seeing
clothes,
right now.
You know, wearing, you know, being modest and all this stuff, and it's like, what about the guys who are objectifying the women?
I know.
No matter what they're wearing.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, for sure. And that's a huge tension that I have too. Because like, obviously if somebody chooses that, that's totally fine. And I feel at times like very empowered dressing modestly. But yeah, when it makes it, when we're, yeah, you know what I'm saying. When we're like putting people up on the freaking, you know, just, indicting them based on a really black and white reasoning around all that.
It's your fault that sexism exists. No, it's
not. Exactly.
Your clothes does not constitute people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
the bigger sins are like, systemic, you know, issues of, patriarchy, race. And so, but when you talk about those things, you know, like I've had a pastor who wanted to meet with me and like ask me questions about my thoughts on critical race theory.
Really? Like recently?
Yeah, back when it was like real big in the news.
So like a year ago?
Yeah, more or less, more a year ago. And, you know, I'm just kind of going through like anti-racism 101, like, like everyone's making this big deal about this thing that was used for legal law. It's like not something that's being even taught in high schools. Basically, people are just using CRT as like a blanket thing to be like, we don't want to talk about historical racism in the U.S. That's basically people are just trying to like tack that as conversation stoppers. And, you know, so then it became this whole like, you know, conversation about how, you know, what's the role of the church. And so I'm like encouraging them like, hey, you should read, you know, have you read Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail, where he's like calling out white pastors for like basically being like, wait until it's the right time. Like, and him and MLK basically like, when is the right time? Like the silent, white pastors, this is the right time. Like there's never, it's always the right time to cry and call out racism and he's talking about how, basically these white pastors aren't showing up to, support the movement. And so then the conversation I had with this pastor was like, I think the role of the church is to have these hard conversations about race and how do we build welcoming communities in our religious spaces. And he was like, yeah, but doesn't Jesus also save us from like lust? And,
oh my gosh.
like, what about those things? What about hell? And don't we need to talk about those things? And I'm like, okay, if that's like what you feel like is the thing you need to talk about, I'm not like, it's that weird, like I have the church speak. And I like, even though I'm in my mind, I'm like, I have no like desire to talk about, argue with you about hell or the existence.
No, for sure. It's more like, okay, but why do you think it's one or the other? Or like, why do you think?
It all comes down to like, I'm like, can you say and decry both? That, hey,
right.
if you feel like pornography is a big sin, well, but wouldn't you say racism's probably affecting more people?
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. That's so tough. I mean, like, it's so tough. I have no, I that's why I'm like, man, I think organizing faith communities is really hard. Like, it is really hard. And like, even though we need that, it's like, man, it's tough.
Yeah. It's like, they're,
and like, we're even hearing that now with like abortion in the sense of, okay, but let's make it about human rights and not about abortion because we're going to upset people. And it's like, that's actually playing more into the fragility of like, if your faith can't even name, like, and if you're, if anything, like those things like lust and like whatever, those personal matters are so hard, are cutting so deep into people's lives, but you can't even talk about, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like if you're truly trying to be a leader for people's like moral lives, like that's really what these faith institutions are. And you can't even talk about the most pressing news of the day.
Right.
Because you're afraid of that conflict or like potentially having to challenge your worldview. Like you should not be in the business of leading people in their faith, which is the most personal thing,
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, the research I was doing for the paper that I wrote in college, now that it's all coming back to my memory now, it's all kind of like, oh yeah. Part of the thing I was studying was how faith communities or like the Christian church that I was studying particularly used to be like the center hub of small towns, villages. And it can be that way sometimes, still to this day somewhat. But I'm talking about like, 1,000 years ago, I mean? Like there was no court system. There was no, police system or whatever the systems that we have today for taxes and whatever. It was just like things are resolved through like if there was community issues, you went to the church, you went to the priest. And there was a lot of authority there, right? And so all those contentious issues were all decided there in like a communal kind of thing. And so basically with the globalization, with multimedia and just really the dawn of like the Industrial Revolution, basically churches and pastoral figures became less and less voices of authority in their own communities.
Right.
People were like, well, I don't go solve my land dispute issue anymore with the priest.
But maybe I do my marriage there. Like maybe I do like my kids like education there. Like you get to pick and choose what issues matter to you when it comes to the faith.
Right. And now they're competing today with like people like Joel Osteen, who has like hundreds of thousands of people who watches church and do stuff. And so he's now a more authoritative figure to people because they see him as more of a, he has a big following, successful, right. The perception. But my little local church, I'm not going to go.
Yeah.
I guess I want to go back to that issue. I guess I just was bringing up an example of like, where these churches, like you're saying, they're afraid to like speak out about these issues is because they really are afraid of losing more authority, or because it equates to them, people leaving the church and them losing their paycheck. And that's, again, the whole thing is wrapped up in capitalism. And when it's like that, you can't have I can't say you can't have a totally 100% authentic community, but I think it really hinders creating an authentic faith community when you are basically at you're beholden to, and you're then, and
I mean, on the flip side, like I've experienced that in a very different light, in the sense of like growing up in a mosque that was like very actually like heavily surveilled. Like, starting a mosque like definitely immediately puts you under the watch of like the government. And so my dad had to like navigate that, like getting questioned, like why are you making a mosque, like what kind of theologies, like he was literally interviewed by people, like he was asked questions
in the FBI or
oh
my gosh,
like that's to even talk about it, but it is true that happened. And
oh my gosh,
and then being on the spotlight of the community, because our mosque was actually burned down like in a hate crime in like 2012. And so
Laela, I'm sorry. God.
I mean, it's pretty bad. The thing is, like, our community was it was mostly doctors, and like it got a lot of attention, so we were able to build a new space that was even better and more fitting. That being said, like, that was a very like shocking thing to happen, on top of like, the perpetrator didn't, even though there's video cameras, like didn't get caught until he actually attempted to burn down the Planned Parenthood in Joplin, and then was caught. So, but in the meantime, the FBI is like asking questions in our community. And so and that experience led to like nobody wanting to speak out, really like wanting to do this. It's basically a simile even harder of like, we are upstanding citizens, we are doctors, we are, because we like contribute to the community, we don't ruffle feathers. And so they don't want to take a political stance. I mean, there's even still like,
right.
I mean, I think there's even like my statements of like from our mosque would like make statements of like, we denounce terrorism. And it's like, but even you taking that step to denounce it means that you think that you're playing into it. You know what I mean? Like, you should actually be like, it's not our job to denounce terrorism. Do you ask the churches to denounce white supremacy? Like, do you ask them to denounce mass shootings when perpetrators, say that they do that in the name of Christianity? No, like the media immediately is like, no, that's not really what Christians think. But with Muslims, you think a community that had nothing to do with it, needs to be answerable. Right. So I just mean like there's also this quietness, but I think it's like, I've noticed that in our mosque. That's survival. But
there's a difference from like a white church who has, again, it's perceived like, hey, I can't speak about abortion or these things because I'll lose congregations. It's coming from losing a place of authority that
right, exactly.
But when you're fighting just to have a foothold in the community of just
like
existing,
not just existing, have a bigger target on your back. Yeah. That being said, though, like I totally agree, and I feel the need to be like, and you know what, y'all, like, I mean, like I said, in Joplin, it is mostly doctors, or like not everyone's a doctor, so. Right. For me, I'm like, we need to also, it's like a class thing too, in the sense of like, they don't want to lose their standing in the community. And like, in some way you have to make a choice. And for some of these congregants, it's very difficult for them to imagine like putting their face, you know what I mean? Like, for sure. And that's why it's like the idea of like larger numbers. I think that's why I'm interested in organizing. Cause I'm like, man, I've been in so many situations where one person's like, I'm afraid to speak out. But I'm like, but if we all did it together, there's not necessarily one name that's attached, Right. If the entire Muslim community spoke out about this, like a faith structure, a school structure, all the students, or like the school structure, whatever structure speaks out about this, it's less risk, right? Like, we have to assume that collective risk of speaking on these things or taking action on these things. So I don't know, it's kind of a ramble again, but I feel that in the sense of like, it's equally been frustrating, and I think that makes you lose faith in your faith institutions when you watch them be spineless like that.
Right.
Because I'm even like, we don't speak out and we're going to get a target on our back, or we do speak out and at least I know you're standing behind me. Like, you have my back.
Right.
And that's a thing. And especially in times like this, like there's so much going on. Like, how can you ignore it? And we still have like, there's still sheikhs at the mosque who are talking about like the proper way to pray. And I'm like, why are we talking about what happened in the news? So it's like, yeah, it's survival. And I'm also like, okay, it's time to get with it. Like we need, the collapse society's upon us. Like,
ooh, yeah. Gosh. Thanks for sharing all that. I know that's like heavy stuff, just what your family and the community went through. And it's it's one of those things where I'm sure, I don't know, how old were you when like 9/11 happened?
I mean, I was like 6, so I still felt it. I mean, 5 or 6. I don't have as like strong of it. Like I don't have this memory of it being on the TV, but I remember like things changing at school. But for me, it was like my whole school time was experiencing that. Whereas my sister like remembers the day, like remembers like that day someone in class being like, your people did this to her. Like, because I don't know why they had it on the, I think a lot of teachers made this mistake, though. How could you have not put it on the TV?
Yeah.
But like she remembers that, and I remember that, but though not the same day, obviously. But like, yeah, like after 9/11, it was pretty bad. And I just remember the straight up propaganda at school around all that. And then obviously, yeah, it didn't get better. It just didn't necessarily get better. I think it got like kind of worse when Obama was president, to be honest. Right. And then, yeah, I don't know. But like I said, I mean,
during the drone wars.
Yeah, like
he killed lots of collateral damage.
I know, which is what was so shocking for us to like people being like, there's a Muslim as president. And we're like, I wish, because I mean, our people are dying right now.
He's
like
over there killing them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, it was just so bizarre. But yeah, I mean, it was tough. Would not raise my kids in Joplin, Missouri, but at least I ended up on the other side of it with like, I think pretty strong and confident in what I think and believe and want to organize around,
Yeah, it sounds like it influenced, like, I mean, I'm sure, like you're saying, like, okay, well, especially when Trump came to presidency and there was all these hate crimes happening in mosques and different places. Like, okay, we've seen this.
Yeah.
It's been happening. It's been cultivating. We need to organize the fuck out of communities to try to address stuff, because
I know
it doesn't just go away with more education.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was always very, like when the Muslim bans happened, I feel like that was actually the first time Muslims, at least in my memory in America, like we're actually like, no, this is really wrong, and we're like mobilized in force in like full force around that. And I think that really was eye-opening to me, because I just didn't think that was ever going to happen. We just spent so long after 9/11 in this apologetic phase. Like, it was very bizarre watching that, just like really everyone feeling like. And that's why I even have this skepticism around interfaith stuff, because it was all about doing interfaith stuff. It still kind of is. Like, Muslims do interfaith stuff to seem like a good neighbor, like they're not threatening. And I just am like, no, I feel like we need to be talking within our community about like what it means to show up for each other,
Right.
Or instead we feel like we need to prove that we're a good neighbor by showing, not that we shouldn't be showing up for our Christian and Jewish and Baha'i and Buddhist neighbors or anything like that, but it's just like we are not at the point of supporting one another super well in this way, you know what I mean?
Right. If anything, it should be Christians having to go to all these other faith groups to prove their good faith.
I mean,
and welcomeness to other communities, like, yeah, I've never thought about it that way. Yeah, I've seen like these panels, and we spiritual community as a part of, they'd have interfaith panel, and again, it wasn't really in response to like stuff happening but it was just like literally a whole faith discussion of like, who is my faith neighbor? And I always wondered, like, did they steal Christians to go be part of the group? Like, not just because, I don't know, like, I think everyone should be able to hold what's true for them. And again, the whole, Muslims shouldn't have to change their faith constructs to fit into the American culture, society, and and that's the whole thing. Like, a lot of Christians would say that they're the minority now, and we're letting all these other faiths and people and all this stuff, and it's like, you're the dominant religion. I mean, look at what they just did with Roe v. Wade. That was like, that's 50 years of Christians, folks. I mean, that was what I was raised being taught. Like, this is the fight for the church. We're trying to stop this from happening.
No, I mean, that's like, Christianity is extremely dominant in our country. And I think, again, like, going back to like why I wanted to study religion, because I'm like, that informs like so much of the way our institutions are set up, the way people live in their communities, more than just like the structure of government. Like, we're taught this story that like, oh yeah, then the founders like separated church and state, and that had nothing to do with Christianity. It's like, they had some like pretty like, Christian supremacist ideas. And so we have to talk about that. It still affects us today. So yeah, I mean, I just don't see obviously like all the things about Supreme Court, I don't know if it should really exist, or like, I don't have generated thoughts around that, but like, I just don't think in my lifetime we may see a Muslim on the Supreme Court. Like, that would just be, and why is that? Because people don't think,
right. Yeah, just having whatever.
Like, not a Christian person like on the Supreme Court would be just a shocker for a lot of Americans. That tells you how like deeply, like you said, they think of the Constitution as scripture. Like, it's very scary.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a lot of work cut out for us. And
well, what about you, Micah? I mean, do you still identify as a Christian? Do you go to church, or do you have more of just like a personal relationship? I know you don't like labels. We all don't like labels.
I'm just spiritual, like all the millennials these days. Yeah, I don't consider myself a Christian in the definition of like, this is like the only faith construct that I abide by. I think there's a powerful story. It's okay.
Oh my gosh, I was just trying to get my
I know these headphones busting on microphones. Yeah, for me, I still deeply connect with Christ, and I connect with the stories in the Bible, and there's yet just this really weird feeling when you back out the camera and you look at the history of humanity as a whole, that it's hard for me to just be like, any one religion is the right one.
Oh, okay. Look, you can be a Christian and be a pluralist. It's not like...
Right. Yeah, I guess for me, there's so much baggage that comes with saying to people like, I am a Bible-believing Christian. Like, there's just so much that's tied up with white supremacy and so much that I don't identify with the current state of Christianity at all. Like the church and the buildings and the structures. And like I said, I was part of a more universalist Christian church called the Open Table for a long while. Kind of fell off during the pandemic and just kind of started enjoying my at-home church on Sundays with myself.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I'm trying to like, it's hard for me. I feel very insecure that I don't also like have like this faith community, because I think for Muslims it's so important. And yet, yeah, ultimately the faith is in you. Like 100. And I believe that. So I have to like not use like, it's hard for me to not use like, oh, well, I don't even really have like a community. I don't know how deeply I believe in this construct even, as an excuse to kind of not do my own internal work, because I crave it, but I don't want to do it. It's kind of easier when it's like with a group of people. Yeah, I don't know. It's just hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is an element of community that is lost when you do go through a faith deconstruction, reconstruction, like if you're Muslim, whatever hey, this is what I grew up with, and now I'm recalibrating and trying to find that group of people. And that's why they say a lot of people who have quote unquote fallen away from their faiths or childhood faiths or whatever are actually like deeply longing to like find those spiritual communities of some sort again. They're just wayward and lost because they feel like, oh, if I show up to this place, you know, they might reject me, or they're not, or yeah, they don't have the same values that I have of like welcoming LGBTQ people. Like there's so many things that you have to like sift through to find, especially if you live in Missouri in the Midwest. You know, it's difficult.
Man, but some people like they love that. They love that. I'm shopping for a church.
Gross.
I feel that. I feel like I hear that.
Back to the capitalism part of it.
Yeah, I know.
I'm
Like
shopping.
there's so many choices. Like you have to win me over with these perks or like, yeah. But yeah, what you were saying is like, yeah.
And I have friends who like go to house churches and like I've thought about like maybe at some point doing something like that again. But again, like for me, I'm just like to me, this is church. And when I hang out with friends, we have these very same conversations. And to me, that is like having church together. And
yeah, man, you just gotta like listen to Sufjan Stevens' album.
Yeah, like
and
seriously,
like, be in your fields with your like pet and Rayla. And yeah, I think even for me, like, you know, those things are meaningful. So I think anything that really just enriches that existential thing we talked about at the beginning, that like desire to really just connect, just feel connected, I think is important.
Whatever connects you with people and the environment. That's what I tell them. Like, whatever connects you with this world and people and has a love and appreciation that you'll advocate and fight for the lives of those people and for the environment, that is a solid church, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that can be church.
Yeah, I think, like, you know, I remember having a moment with my dad. Probably the most instructive thing he ever did for me, because I think it's very hard to raise Muslim children. At least, like, for my parents, like, not having a mosque, not having that teacher,
right.
You know, having to teach them Quran and how to pray. And, like, I just think they got tired and, like, kind of gave up, even though they felt very strongly. They were like, this is too much.
Yeah.
I just remember telling my dad once, because he asked me to speak at the Sunday school graduation. I was like, 15 or 16. I was like, I'm not a really good Muslim though. Like, why me? And he was like, I mean, whatever we think about the idea of citizen, he's like, but you're a good citizen and you like are a good human, and that's why you're a good Muslim. And I was like, oh, Dad, that's so nice.
See, and that's like, like being able to challenge the rigidity of what we define as these camps. Like, I tell people all the time, like, I feel like I'm a better Christian now than I was all the years I claimed to be a Christian. You know what I mean? Like, in many ways now, I feel like I'm more like Christ than I've ever been.
Wow. Everyone hear that? Micah thinks he is like
I am the Christ. Actually, here's our robes. Everybody.
His beard needs to be like
drink my blood, eat my flesh.
Oh,
you know?
gosh. All right, everyone. When I disappear after this recording,
just know it's because I sacrificed her to my dog and cat, you know.
Okay.
But like, like to be able to, you know, I think for me, like a lot of times, like, like people in my life who knew me before and just, you know, to them I've fallen away from God and I'm like on this sinner's path. And again, that's their definition. That's how they're trying to, you know, and I did it too, you know, like people who didn't go to church, and I just feel like, man, it's so unfortunate that those people just gave up on God. No one these people.
Yeah, how is that for you to decide? What if they didn't give up on God at all? And they just stop, you know, participating in this business.
I've shared this, I think, before on the podcast, but one of my friends, Lois Swimmer, she is a volunteer activist person at Cherith Brook Catholic Worker House. She's Lakota tribe, Native American, and she just talks about how foreign this idea of, like, you know, Americans and American Christianity being like, you can either be in with God or outside of God. You're either in that or out of it. And she was just like, we don't have that concept in my faith. Like, I wake up and I'm in God. I'm breathing. I'm a part of God. Like, I can't decide that I'm in or out of this relationship.
Yeah.
I'm just existing in this world that is, all of it is in God. And that's what I mean by like the pan and, you know, just like this, the worldview that I have now is just like, okay,
Well, and like, yeah, I don't know if it's the same. Like, I've anytime I've felt insecure, people have, there's like a saying that like you take, at least amongst Muslims, I don't know, like you take one step towards God and God takes 10 steps towards you. And it doesn't matter where it doesn't have to happen in a masjid, like a mosque. It doesn't have to happen in the confines of like,
Right.
And only you can determine what is in your intention or in your heart,
Yeah, that's why I have to like encourage family or friends or people from my church background who are concerned for my soul. I have to just reassure them, like, I need you to trust that, like, I'm a seeker of truth. Like I want to live out life to the best I can, trying to seek out that truth. And like, I need you to trust that if the divine, God, the spirit, whatever is the truth, then my roundabout, curvy, zigzaggy path, whatever it is, it's going to lead me right back to them,
That's a good point. People want a straightforward, they have a straightforward answer, and then they get stressed out when you kind of disrupt that,
Oh yeah. It's just simpler, right? Like I go to church on Sundays, I read the Bible, and I go to work, and I tell my friends and family these things, and
that's why that's actually what you're bringing up for me is like there's this weird tension where like on the one hand I reject this like super individualized view of faith that's like feels very like like as a result of capitalism or just like whatever, that like your individual accounting. But actually when you think about it, like we should encourage people, like your faith is, that's what I mean, is like in you, only you can know it, and so no one else can be a judge of it. And in some way it's like, yes, I believe in communities of care and like the strong like social movements and all of that, but when it comes to like, is Micah's soul saved, that has nothing to do with you, and that's where it's like all these things are actually about appearance in some way, or actually just about everyone becoming a judge of each other instead of
it's a form of control.
Yeah, exactly. It's like social control. And instead of like, actually we need to move towards like, your faith is interior, like in some way you can experience it socially, you can experience it in relationship with others, but at the end of the day it's you and your like faith, it's not anyone else's to like dictate. So I think that's that weird tension in the sense of, like I already said. So
yeah, in many ways. And I don't necessarily, I'm not a huge like AA advocate.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it has a lot of positive things for alcoholic community, but something that I do appreciate about it from friends who are in the program, because it was started by a Christian, but it has obviously evolved since that point and has become more of an agnostic or neutral kind of system. But the whole first step is like acknowledging that you have a problem, and like basically you need a power outside of yourself to like break this like cycle you're in. And in many ways I feel like if every faith construct and everything could not take not the same approach of like everyone's broken or has a problem, but in many ways we're human.
It's breaking down ego.
Yeah, it's like, hey, there's something that
you don't have the answer, actually.
Exactly.
You don't know the right way to live.
And it may be God, but they even say like it could be the power of love for your family. It could be the power of like whatever that power is to you, that's going to help you overcome this addiction.
Yeah. And that's a leap of faith is what I mean. Like you don't actually know if that thing is going to be the thing, but you're having faith that like actually the power of my family's love is something that would help me overcome this. Like that is,
right.
I don't know, maybe like Kierkegaard said that or something, but I just think that's very fascinating. Like people do those like faith moves all the time of like having a belief in that's something that I don't know how it works. I don't know why, but I just trust it.
You have a non-Christian who's closer to Christ or closer whatever than ever, because they may not even say, hey, it's Jesus who's going to save you from alcoholism. But it's this, like you're saying, this choosing to acknowledge that the ego is crushing me.
Yeah, like I
and
have
it's
to
removing me from connection with people. It's feeding my addictions. And so
Yeah.
I need something outside of myself within, that's going to influence within myself.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's why, like, in organizing, like we talk about this idea of prophetic imagination. This like,
Ooh, tell me more about that.
yeah, I mean, I don't fully know the concept, but I'm just like this idea, like, even if we're not sure, we have to project this image that like we are powerful. Like this movement or this whatever is so powerful and has the answer to the society's woes, like this moral authority or this like, just and people
Yes.
believe it for some reason, whether it's because of your messaging of hope, the people who are involved, their stories, or like the way you take action. There's just this and whatever this group's like imagination for the future is, like, you believe it, and that's like also kind of a work of faith, in my opinion. Like, we don't know if I'm sure like people thought that, like, when they saw like the civil rights movement, we don't know why, like, we don't know if this is actually gonna, you don't fully know, but there's something that gave you your trust, and they have this imagination for a beloved community or community where
Yes.
X, Y, and Z happens, and you believe it, and it creates a change of heart. Like, I don't know, I think we can do those moves, those like faith maneuvers all the time for the betterment of society. That's why, like, I don't think you can ever, at least for me, I don't think I can ever fully lose my faith, because I see the way this same process, like we were describing, like makes people better,
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, yeah, it's both, and it's us, but it's us in relation to community. And we have to do that in movements, spiritual work, individual work. If I just work on myself and cut myself off from everybody and lived in a cabin in the woods, again, my love for myself will probably become this weird distortion,
Yeah.
it's all, yeah. And I'm not saying like spending time with yourself and working on yourself is a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's a stream that we're all a part of, and trying to deny that our love becomes a distortion. And I think the problem with people who are extremists on, the, whatever conservative right is, like, it's trying to make it's this world where their strength comes from isolation of, like, these people are not a part of this thing.
Oh yeah.
And their strength is trying to build up. And so our strength is in our belief that we need each other.
Yeah.
That we're only gonna be able
even
to,
those people are hurting themselves. Like, they don't even
Right.
realize, like, I'm not saying I have to bend over backwards for them, but you know, like, it's not my job to convert someone against radical white supremacy, but I do think some part of them is denying their own humanity,
Oh, for
like,
sure. And what are the stepping zones before people get there, right? It's usually like, I can't, there's no one mold fits all kind of thing, but like,
they do,
it becomes
prey
a
on
distortion
this-
of love towards yourself and others. It's this, I know what I stand against rather than what I stand for kind of mentality.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you're that person who's like, I'm against Jews and this and that, and that your whole identity and self-love is a distorted, it's a mutated existence. And
no, I definitely, yeah.
that was
And
me
also,
rambling.
No, I get it. But I'm also like, and then ascribing, like, this is a conspiracy, like ascribing more power than is possible to those groups. And so, like, all their woes are like ascribed to, like, all these other groups of, like, trans people or Jewish people or Muslim people are destroying everything, and I'm a victim, and I'm, like, I don't know. It's some level of, distortion of, like, what their relation is to, like, other people.
Right.
To
as perceived, people stealing their power and their connection with the world. And it's like, people, politics and everything, they're doing a really good job keeping us divided. And that's,
but we're more powerful than them. And I mean, society is like rigged to give them such a platform when really they're in a minority, I think, like genuinely, but it's,
Yeah. Even your Republican people, they're not out here like, I hate everybody who is not a Republican. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like reasonable person who maybe just has their own political, you know, like at the end of the day, they, you know.
But the system gave those people, like, they just have more power than they need. Like Jerry, all the systems, like, it's just so rigged, and then they think they're more important than they are.
Yeah. If there's
stronger numbers, like, than it is, and that's very frustrating. So it's like less than like even the people who believe it's like, oh my gosh, but these rules are not working. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's frustrating.
Yeah. Yep. We have to share this world. And
unfortunately.
And there's enough space for all of us. And there's enough resources. Well, tell me, Laela, where can folks find you online?
Oh my gosh.
Or you can throw out organizations you volunteer with, and like, are there any websites, honorable mentions you like?
Okay, I'd love to honorable mention Sunrise Movement, and we didn't really talk about it super in depth, but Sunrise Movement, Kansas City is a chapter of the National Sunrise Movement, and we are young people fighting for a Green New Deal and to, you know, they say stop the climate crisis. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but stop the worst effects of it through some like really awesome local work that we're doing in Kansas City. I mean, obviously we want a Green New Deal nationally, but locally we're really trying to get, you know, Micah, we live down the street from a coal plant.
Yeah.
And so like trying to really change your energy systems here, not just for the sake of the planet, but for the benefit of the community, you know? I highly recommend y'all support Sunrise MVMTKC at Instagram, or you can find me on Instagram. My handle is LAELZ_. So yeah.
Famous Laela, everybody.
Famous.
The star of the show.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me for the Pray for Micah podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review, and check out my YouTube channel and follow me on social media. Pray for Micah Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We'll see you next time.
You are now re-entering the normal world.